Hey everyone, it's Bina 007 here, actually with a video review because I have things that I want to say about the Odyssey, partly because I've just reread the book for the first time since high school. And what I discovered rereading it, and to be clear, it's not the translation but by Emily Wilson upon which the new Chris Nolan film is based, it's an older one, is that the story of the Odyssey is a beautifully magical, wondrous, poetic, exciting story, and that it contains narrative complexity, but also moral complexity. The Odyssey of the book is sometimes a juvenile prick. I mean, he starts off as a braggart, as someone who cannot resist boasting about what he has done, and he walks sure in his own prowess, not just military, but for being slippery and sly and mischievous. This is a man, even after he finally gets home to Ithaca and he's been through all his trials and tribulations and he's lost all of his troops, finally gets home. And the moral growth of this story is that he has to now be humbled to look like a humble beggar, and he has to keep his true identity secret from everyone and take the slings and the bows and the bruises of the insults from the suitors. But the point is that even when he's meant to be morally grown and able to do this and to bite his tongue, he still cannot help lying. I mean, he spins such a ridiculous story to Athena, who's in disguise at this point. She immediately is like, please, just stop. Like, I am as slippery and wise and mischievous as you. I know you're talking nonsense. And similarly, when he meets his father at the end, he spins a story about who he is. This is a guy who delights and loves and is almost like a serial, cannot help himself liar. He's a mischief maker. Yes, he grows a little bit, thank goodness, but he's fundamentally quite a slippery character. And that's how people refer to him. That's how the poem refers to him. People are always given adjectives and epithets in this poem. And he's always seen as, slippery, sly, wily Odysseus, son of Laertes. So he's a very complicated character. And of course, it's a book set in a pre-Christian, pre-modern world with very different notions of the gods, of justice, of marriage, of sex. So this is a book in which no one is sitting there moping around worrying about, oh, the horrors of war, and oh, I lost all my soldiers, and oh, I set fire to Troy. I'm a bad person. The trick of the Trojan horse. Wow, woe is me. That is not this book. This is not a book of regret, because ultimately, when Odysseus gets home and savagely slaughters the suitors, he does so knowing that he's doing the will of the gods and he has justice on his side. In fact, he literally has a god, Athena. It's kind of like the A team. There's four of them. There's him, Telemachus. Actually, there's five, right? Because there's him, his son Telemachus, there's Athena, who's now in the guise of mentor. There's the goat herd and the swineherd, and they're kind of with their sticks and stuff and killing everyone. And it's absolutely flipping brutal. And he's covered in gore and guts. And at one point they say he's covered in gore and guts like a lion who's just feasted on an ox. This is not a bloodless assassination. And when people ask for mercy in the film, there's a scene where some of the suitors take to their knees and Matt Damon's Odysseus spares them. There's no sparing of people in this. He absolutely brutally kills them. He then rounds up the slave girls who were sleeping with the suitors and absolutely brutally kills them. He wraps them all in a row and their necks entwine and twangs them off. And then, they carry on. They kill Melanthius. They pluck out his eyes. They torture him before he dies. And there's no regret. There's no regret. And is there a feeling that he will have to flee for breaking Zeus's law and killing people who have guessed right? Yeah, there's a bit of a concern that there might be reprisals from the families of this dead man. But, Odysseus is like, no, well, for a start, you acted in my name, you were avenging people, and actually, I'm just going to make it so that there's a nice compact between the two of you. So there's no sense in the book that Odysseus must be punished for this. In fact, he lives to a ripe old age, right? And there's peace in the realm. So it's a very, very different book. Now, interestingly, let's talk a little bit about, sex and romance. Penelope, the wise, the trusting, the loyal wife of Odysseus, absolutely But let us remember that Zeus is having sex. And not just with Calypso, who, by the way, does not give him lotus flower for years and years. The tragedy, actually, of the episode with Calypso is that while he is sleeping with her at night, and you can argue whether it's coerced or not and how far he's her slave, in the day he's crying and weeping because he wants to go home to his wife. It would be far easier, it would be far gentler if he can remember right. And Cersei, and don't get me wrong, I love Samantha Morton. I love this sort of like this feminist sort of Cersei of the film. That's like one of the highlights of the film to me. But we have to believe, I think, when we read the book, that Cersei is a genuine sexual rival for Penelope. And Mary Beard made this point in a brilliant article in the British version of the Times newspaper recently, that he's with Cersei voluntarily. And this is something that he could stick with. So I feel that when we read the Greeks, when we read the ancients, we do so for a sense of awe and wonder and majesty and mystery, and to be challenged as readers with a world that's incredibly different to our own, with different presumptions around morality, with different presumptions around what a good person is and what a hero is. And I feel that while Chris Nolan wants to present, in some ways, a morally complex hero, not this morally complex hero. He's telling his own tale. He's using the story of Homer's Odyssey, but he's very much telling his own tale. So, to a certain extent, this is all a long preamble to say that I think you kind of have to push aside Homer and watch the film on its own terms. Maybe we need to push every source material to its side and watch every film on its own terms. But I think it's very hard to do so when it's as foundational to our cultural understanding as Homer. The problem is then that I think that what you have in Chris Nolan's Odysseus is a rather narratively complex but morally simple and uninteresting film. Partly because it's the film he just made a couple years ago and won a bunch of Oscars for. And that's Oppenheimer. So Oppenheimer is a film about a very, very, very clever guy who helps create this technology that fundamentally changes the world and feels really flipping guilty about it and struggles to deal with it in his, afterlife. And this Odysseus is the same. It's a guy who came up with a very, very clever thing, the Trojan horse, that wreaked terrible, savage damage on Troy and changed the world forever. Apparently bringing or helping to bring civilization in the Bronze Age to an end. Pro tip, Chris Nolan, I don't think people who live in the Bronze Age refer to themselves as living in this age of bronze. And that's all interesting. It's very postmodern, it's very deep, it's very profound. It's quite boring because we did see that done so brilliantly in Oppenheimer. I didn't need to see it done again here. And what we have here then is a film where, because there aren't really gods, I mean, Athena kind of walks among us, but it's a film shorn of the gods. It's a film shorn of sexual complexity. Insofar as Odysseus has cheated on Penelope, he's done so under the influence of drugs. So it's not really his fault. So he's just a good man, apart from this one flaw, which was, burning Troy to ashes. And he goes home to Penelope and he's well rewarded for his good work. I mean, he's a very moral man, right? He doesn't kill the suitors who show contrition and literally bend the knee toward him. And in fact, it's Penelope, poor Penelope, he's traduced with pushing her maidservant into the pit where everyone's getting assassinated in the books. Penelope is entirely innocent of this. So it's a different story with a very neat, happy ending. I find that quite uninteresting. What is good about the Chris Nolan film, of course, because it's Chris Nolan, is the craftsmanship, the skill of everything to do with manufacturing cinema. So production design, set design, cinematography, the technical mastery of the 70mm IMAX format, an incredibly modern score, which actually didn't really work for me. Phenomenal actors because he can pick from the cream of the crop in how he casts. So there's a lot to be said in its praise if you set aside that it's Homer's Odysseus. A couple of things that didn't work very well for me were the use of quite broad American accents by some of the cast, particularly Tom Holland's Telemachus. I thought had a very kind of broad kind of, yeah, it was an accent that I didn't appreciate. I actually really like John Leguizamo as Eumaeus, but there were times when his accent was a little bit Miracle Max from The Princess Bride. Um, and I felt that, I don't know, I just think a lot of it doesn't make sense if you strip away the gods. And because you strip away the gods, then you have to sort of make things like Zeus's law take on like an importance in this film that is unmerited and really annoying. Although in future, this will become a very good drinking game for students at college. Take a shot every time you hear that character say Zeus's law. What did I like? What did I really like? What is really praiseworthy in this film, I think, are some of the performances and some of the ways in which scenes are put together. I think Samantha Morton, who I've long admired as Cersei in this sort of angry, seething feminist take of what it is to be a woman who has these warriors tumble in en masse, to, like, weaponed up asking for food. Her angry speech, I think, is tremendous. I wonder if it's too short to be worthy of a Best Supporting Actress nomination, but then Judi Dench, Shakespeare in Love, so maybe she'll get some awards love. I really like Robert Pattinson chewing the scenery as Antinous. Like he makes a good baddie, right? He'd make a great Bond villain, make a great Bond. And I also want to just speak to where I think Chris Nolan really, really does well, which is the way he uses the character of Sinon, played beautifully by Elliot Page. At the start of the film, you have Sinon shown as the Trojan horse is discovered by King Priam's troops. And he's like shot through with arrows and like, oh, that, I mean, that's Chris Nolan, right? He can get Elliot Page just for like 30 seconds of film. That's his privilege. But then that character comes back and comes back as you realize that you're now going to hear the tale of Troy told in three ways. You're going to hear it told by the bard in the prologue, in the halls of Penelope. You're then going to hear it told by John Bernthal's character. So you're going to hear it told by from the perspective of someone within the horse and see again, okay, let's get postmodern. Let's unpick what it was like inside that horse. And then you're going to hear it finally told from the perspective of Sinon, who's now in the underworld, in the land of Hades, because they perished. And you're going to see Sinon become the conscience of Odysseus and ask him, you lied to me. You deceived me for your greater end. And then you left me. You did not carry out the funeral rites of your men who died on this voyage. And so you are damned. And it's a beautifully done scene. The way they depict the underworld, this kind of gloopy, black, murky, bloody gunk from out of which comes Tiresias, the prophet, just head peering above this gunk. And these troops that are bloodied and muddied and dark and angry and menacing. It's an amazing scene. Again, I think Elliot Page deserves all the praise for this. And Chris Nolan for conceiving of it. And I think what he's doing is he's obviously using a character that isn't in the Odyssey. It's a character in the Aeneid written in Rome many centuries later. And bringing them back into this story because he wants to tell the story of Troy. And in a sense, he's taking some of the regret that we see in the actual Odyssey that's put in the words of Achilles. So in the actual Odyssey, we see the bravest, the most archetypal of Greek soldiers, Achilles, in Hades when Odysseus goes to visit. And this is the ultimate symbol of masculinity and the ultimate symbol of what it is to be a hero in the Greeks. And it's totally subverted by Homer. Because Achilles says, I would rather be alive and be a serf, be working the fields in employ of someone else than rule here over Hades. Like all of this heroism, everything that I opted for, the hero's death, is meaningless and sad and empty. So there's subversion in the original Odyssey, but I think the way that Nolan uses it here to power his story of a hero, Odysseus coming to terms with what he's done and what he's done to his men, I think is incredibly powerful, beautifully put together and well done. So Cersei and that, I think, highlights. Where does it go wrong? I mean, the pivotal scene, my goodness, the pivotal arrow through the axis scene is just so nonsense. How do you assassinate a whole bunch of people and not have any blood spatter on you? Is it because he wanted to get the 15 certificate and get, I mean, come on, guys, come on. You're going to show a massacre, show a massacre. But of course, he can't do that, right? Because his Odysseus, Matt Damon's Odysseus, has this one flaw, which is that he did Troy and now he's guilty for the massacre, but fundamentally he's a good guy. He's not going to glory in a random massacre. Well, it's not random, in a very well motivated massacre, because that's not the hero that Nolan thinks that we can digest as a modern audience, which I find a little bit patronizing. So overall, a very handsomely made, beautifully made film. But why? What's it for? What's it giving you that Oppenheimer didn't give you? To me, Oppenheimer is a very complete and very perfect film. But what does this give you? The budget, the opportunity that Nolan had to bring us something on screen that would have been dazzling to our postmodern eyes, that would have given us a peek into a world with an incredibly different morality, with an incredibly different set of values, I think would have been challenging to us and delicious to enjoy, and kind of funnier and kind of sexier and kind of bloodier and gorier. Oh, yes, one other, let me end on a positive note. Circe, Hades, the final scene I want to point to is the Cyclops, because although the scene with Polyphemus is butchered because Odysseus isn't allowed to be slippery and braggadocio and tell him his name, I think the depiction of Polyphemus is really beautiful. The way that creature is created, the haunting sadness of a man whose home has been invaded and whose eye has been taken out, I think is done incredibly well and incredibly sensitively. Odysseus has no right to be in that cave. He has no right to be unwanted, just interfering with this guy's life and treating him as an other on his own island. So I think that's done incredibly, incredibly well. So what can I say about the Odyssey? I love that book. Please go back and read it in whatever translation you prefer. There's lots of good ones out there. You can even go back to Alexander Pope and all the great poets. Please watch the film by all means. I think it's a very good film, but it's by no means perfect. And I think it kind of misses the point. Sorry, Christopher Nolan. Sorry, all the Nolan fanboys. Anyway, you may or may not agree with what I said. Feel free to leave a comment. Happy to engage, and I hope you enjoyed this discussion. Thank you.